Hello, fellow mech warriors, Mage Leader here. Welcome back to the Battlemech Primer, the series where I make fun of other factions while pretending that mine isn't dead. Well, it's been long overdue. After more than 24 installments in this unexpectedly popular set of lectures, I've finally gotten to this point. My reluctance came from the simple fact that others have discussed this mech elsewhere. I felt that there was little that I could add that hadn't already been done to death by literally every other mech warrior in the galaxy. But no matter what, this thing always seems to get requested. It's done to death, it's overblown, it's a fucking meme. But you guys won't shut up until I cover it, so here it is. No frills, no fuss, no references to early 21st century politicians, and without further ado, let's start talking about the Urbanmech. The Urbanmech was first produced in 2675 by Orgus Industries. Why? No fucking idea, but they did. Alright, look, I'm just going to get this out of the way right up front. Calling the Urbanmech a Battlemech is a bit of a stretch. This thing is, well, not great. It's not designed for typical combat or even genuine military service. In fact, some have claimed that Orgus made the Urbanmech as cheaply as possible in order to maximize their profit margins by having the most inexpensive Battlemech on the market. If so, then the strategy was successful, as the low price point made it immensely attractive to militaries who couldn't afford lances of actual Battlemechs. The catch? Well, it's cheap for a reason. The Urbanmech's default configuration is the UMR60, which comes with an AC-10 and a small laser. I know most of you are expecting me to rave about the meme potential of the UMR60L, which drops some armor and ammo capacity in exchange for an AC-20, but the simple fact is that this variant is rare and saw far less use. While it does exist, and the ability to mount such a powerful gun on a light mech is somewhat impressive, for all practical purposes, the UMR60 is far more representative of the Urbanmech's capabilities. For the uninitiated, its loadout may seem adequate, until you remember that the top speed of an Urbanmech is 32.4 kph. I'll say that again, 32.4 kilometers per hour. Top speed. This 30-ton machine has the exact same top speed as an Annihilator while packing less firepower than a Centurion. Now, some would argue that the lack of speed isn't a massive disadvantage. This is because the Urbanmech, true to its name, is designed for urban combat. City fighting is a nasty business, with lots of places to hide and ambush from. Some of the biggest and most powerful armies in human history have been bested by a lesser force in urban combat. In the tight confines of a city, the pitiful output of the Linux 60 power plant aren't nearly as much of a liability, since cover is rarely ever more than a couple steps away. This fact, combined with the Urbanmech's low unit cost, has made it an attractive option for small periphery kingdoms and law enforcement agencies. However, most military forces in the inner sphere find it woefully inadequate even in this role. As I said, the Urbanmech sold well initially, right up until people actually started to use it. Turns out that even when you're in tight quarters, being the slowest machine on 2 feet is a massive liability. The great houses largely discarded their Urbanmech forces, relegating them to planetary garrisons and training facilities. A few even used theirs as target practice. The only great house that kept them up in any considerable numbers was the Capellan Confederation, and that's mostly because it's all they could afford. Liao is also the only place you're likely to run into the elusive AC-20 variant that everyone likes to pretend is the real Urbi. But even the Capellans barely use that one. Its lack of armor and its frankly pitiful ammo capacity has made it perhaps the least popular variant of the Urbanmech ever produced. In fact, the Urbanmech as a whole was so unpopular among house armies that despite only having one initial production run, very few were lost during the Succession Wars. Let me put that into perspective real quick. The Succession Wars, particularly the First and Second, were all-out wars on a galactic scale. It was a no-holds-barred contest for the single most powerful ruling position in human history, the seat of the First Lord of Star League. The great houses held nothing back in these conflicts. Warship strikes, nuclear bombardment, and every other nasty variant of warfare was attempted. The destruction was unthinkable, and as the armies ground each other down until they had nothing left, they began to pull out mothballed battlemechs and dead-end designs to keep the war machine running. Mackies would find themselves back on the front lines, riflemen were pressed into anti-battlemech positions, cicadas were given all manner of weaponry and forced to duel things 3 times their size. It was a desperate time, fueled by a reckless desire to defeat the enemy at any cost. And despite that desperation, in the face of all the insanity that the great houses resorted to, virtually no one was crazy enough to field Urbanmechs. That's how useless the average military finds this machine. They'd rather pull a Battlemech prototype from the pre-Star League era out of the local museum than send in the armored trash can. So now that I've been shitting on this Battlemech for the past several minutes, you may be wondering why everyone seems to love it so much. Well, I think there are a few reasons for this. First, just look at it. It's so ugly, so derpy, that it's almost cute. There's something incredibly endearing about a machine that looks like this trying to fight bigger and better mechs. It hits the same dopamine receptors in our brains as watching a holovid of a 3-legged puppy trying to assert dominance over an adult pit bull. Second, it's the underdog angle of the mech warriors who pilot them. Strapping yourself into an armed recycling bin and going into battle takes some serious balls, and probably a decent amount of total insanity. It's a tale as old as humanity itself, David against Goliath. We have a natural draw to that heroic image of a noble Urbanmech driver facing down something bigger and far more deadly, with nothing more than a mid-sized cannon and a glorified laser pointer. Finally, I think people just find the whole thing fucking funny. The fact that this machine even exists at all is a form of tragic comedy that only the inner sphere can provide. Better machines have disappeared over the years, and some still haven't been recovered, but the Urbanmech lives on, not because of any inherent quality, but simply because it's not useful enough to be worth destroying. For every daring exploit and seemingly impossible kill under the little trash can's belt, there are 100 more instances of the little machine that could being the little machine that fucking died. So that's the Urbanmech. It's a cheap battlemech intended for a single purpose, one in which its utility is barely average. While it's true that you should never ignore it or turn your back on it, you shouldn't be afraid of it either. Its legacy rests on the shoulders of memes and in-jokes, and the truth about it is far less glamorous. That said, those who drive it are mad bastards with nothing to lose, a quality that makes for some of the most dangerous piloting in existence, so don't get too cocky. Laugh at the mech, but never underestimate the mech warrior. Thank you all so much for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons in the Mech Warrior tier: Sean Hurd, Kenneth Henshaw, Delphino, Miguel Batacan, Alexander Heimerl, Chef Sung, Delta 505, Military Sticks, Spacer, Arcos Raid, Kyle Vidari, Tim Cook, Tomayaga Tudor, Gary Moses Sweeney, and Admiral Chirino. Your support helps keep the old dropship flying. You can also support the channel by subscribing or by leaving a like and comment below. Thank you once again, and until next time, this is Mage Leader, signing off.